My name is Sable Mercer, and I own a small bookstore on a block that still smells like ink and warm bagels, even after the rain. I'm 32. The neon sign above my door flickers, Mercer and Finch in stubborn cursive, like it's holding on to a promise I didn't know was already broken. Morning light crawls across the hardwood floor, catching dust like glitter. We shelve with coffee breath and soft music before opening. I like the quiet before customers, the hush of paper breathing. Finch Elliot. Finch used to love this hour. He'd bring 2 lattes, say something about margins and miracles. He's been my business partner for 7 years. My friend for 10, my blind spot forever. Our crown jewel is Maya Rook. If you read thrillers in Brooklyn, you've read Maya. Her last signing bent the street into a line of faces, all hope and dog-eared copies. The bell over the door chirps. A courier delivers a manila envelope thick enough to make my palms sweat. It's addressed to Elliot, but the courier shrugs. He said you'd be here. I slit the envelope with our brass paper knife. Invoices. A contract. Not just any contract, the contract. The one that should have kept Maya with us for her next book. The one Elliot swore he'd buttoned up. I scan the pages. The header is wrong. No letterhead, just a JPEG slapped into a document. The signature block lists an old address for Maya's agent, an address I know because I used to send cupcakes there when deals closed. Something sour rises in my throat. I call Elliot. He answers on the second ring, slick with cheer. Morning, Sabes. You get the courier. I did, I say. Why is the agency header a low-res image? And why is Larkin Literary on Atlantic when they moved to Dumbo? 3 years ago. Silence. I hear him swallow. Must be a template thing. Don't worry. Don't worry, I echo, and I hate how small my voice sounds. Elliot, did you draft this? Listen, he says, dropping his voice. We needed momentum. Maya is slippery. I feel the shelf behind me steady my spine. Elliot, did you or did you not send Maya a fake contract? He exhales like I'm the problem. Fake is a harsh word. I hang up before I hear the spin. My hands shake. The bell rings again. Maya steps in with a scarf swirled like storm clouds and eyes that do not miss. She spots the envelope on the counter. Is that the contract you and Elliot sent me? Her presence pulls the oxygen out of the room. Yes, I say. I need to understand what happened. What happened, she says, is that I signed it. She places a neat folder on the counter. The notary stamped it. Your partner wired a signing bonus with the subject line, friend rate. My agent didn't see it because Elliot told me you wanted to keep it quiet. He said you wanted to surprise the team. I feel the floor list under me. A surprise. To who, me? Maya is calm in the way people are when they've already cried. Then my agent found it this morning when I mentioned the bonus. The letterhead is wrong, Sable. The terms undercut our standard by half. And the rights clause. She taps the page. It assigns all digital rights to a shell LLC Finch Harbor Media. Do you know what that is? No, but the name lands like a slap. I flip the contract as if the truth might ooze out of the margins. The shell company has an address in Red Hook, a P.O. box. I'm so sorry, I say, and the words are inadequate, brittle. I didn't know. I believe you, she says, and that mercy hurts worse. But belief doesn't undo signatures. She watches me for a beat. You fought for me, Sable, every time. But if your house is crooked, my books fall with it. There are customers now pretending not to listen. Someone coughs into a sleeve. Someone else fingers a tote bag like it might give them answers. I want to scream. I want to go to Red Hook and set a mailbox on fire. I want to rewind to the moment Elliot said, "Don't worry." Instead, I say, "Give me 2 hours." Maya tilts her head. For what? To make a call, I say. Then another. To pull the thread. She nods once. 2 hours, then my agent goes nuclear. When she leaves, the bell sounds like a door closing on a decade. I lock the front, flip the sign to back in 10, and walk to the stockroom where the Wi-Fi is strongest and my faith is weakest. I start with public records. Finch Harbor Media is a newborn filed 2 months ago. Registered agent Elliot Finch. My stomach turns. I open our bank dashboard. Elliot moved funds, small transfers, frequent the way you move sand out of a castle without collapsing it. He relabeled expenses like event flowers and janitorial overtime. We don't have flowers. We barely have overtime. I call him again. Straight to voicemail. I text meet me at the shop now, or I go to Larkin and the DA. The typing dots appear, vanish, reappear. Then a reply, don't be dramatic. Come to the office at noon. We'll fix optics. Optics. Like this is a lens issue, not a theft. I screen record everything. I email the clip to myself, to an attorney I met at a fundraiser, to an address I made years ago for a just-in-case folder. I didn't know the case would be this. Noon feels like a far shore. I kill the next hour by doing the only thing that ever calmed me. I shelve. I talk to the books. I listen to the spines whisper their stubborn little songs. At 11:41, the door rattles. It's Liza from next door, her apron dusted with sugar. She holds up her phone, cheeks flushed. Is it true, she whispers? Is Elliot trending? My mouth goes dry. She shows me the screen, a forum thread local bookstore accused of rights scam. A user with a burner name posted PDFs of the contract, blacking out signatures but leaving the LLC and our store name clear as day. Who posted this, Liza asks. I don't know, it wasn't me. Maya wouldn't. Her agent, maybe, or Elliot trying to control the story. The bell rings again. Two men I don't recognize stand in the doorway clean cut, wearing the kind of neutral jackets that announce we work in compliance. One flashes a card. Ms. Mercer, I'm Investigator Cardenas with the DA's office. This is Mr. Lang. We'd like to ask you a few questions about a contract sent from your store. For a second, all I hear is the kettle in the back clicking off. Then my heartbeat returns loud and unpretty. Of course I say, please come in. We sit at the reading table where kids draw dragons on Saturdays. Cardenas is kind but avalanche calm. Ms. Mercer, were you aware of a company called Finch Harbor Media? I am now, I say. Did you or your partner send Ms. Rook a contract misrepresenting terms? I did not. I say the words clean as glass. My partner handled that negotiation. Do you have access to his communications? I slide my laptop across and open the shared drive. There's a folder I've never seen holdbacks. Inside are subfolders labeled with author's initials. There's one with MR. There are drafts, screenshots, even a Google Doc titled Friend Rate Narrative. My mouth tastes like pennies. Take whatever you need, I say. Cardenas nods. We'll need copies. And Ms. Mercer do not speak with Mr. Finch without counsel. Too late. Noon ticks closer. They leave with a polite gravity that makes me want to crawl out of my skin. As the door shuts, my phone buzzes with 3 messages from unknown numbers. The first is a reporter. Comment on the allegations. The second is a lawyer. We represent authors harmed by deceptive practices. The third is from a number I know by heart. Elliot upstairs. Office now, he's here. I stand feeling every nerve like a live wire. The stairs to our shared office are narrow, each step a confession. At the landing, I see him through the glass. Tie loose jaw, said a man rearranging a storm to fit his calendar. He looks up, smiles like a photograph. Sable, he says, spreading his hands as if he's welcoming me to our own crime scene. Let's be smart. I close the door behind me. Start with the truth. He leans on the desk like he's owned it all his life. The truth, he says, is that we were dying. Cash flow ran a market that wants free words. I did what I had to do to keep us alive. A laugh snaps out of me by stealing our author. By leveraging momentum, he says, and I see it then, the man who can rename theft into strategy until the mirror believes him. I step closer, undo it, now. He shakes his head, pitying. It's bigger than you think. How big, I ask. He taps his phone. A text thread opens. At the top is a name that makes the room tilt, a distributor we've chased for years, the one that could brick us into the national map. The thread is months long. They're in on it. They knew. My breath leaves me like I've been punched. Downstairs, the bell rings. Up here, Elliot's phone lights with a new message from the same thread. Distributor clock's ticking. Either you deliver the digital rights package by 5, or we walk and you eat the penalty. The penalty number glows like a dare. Elliot pockets the phone. See, it's not personal Sable, it's business. I hear my voice from far away. And what am I? He smiles, tired and triumphant. You, he says, are the optics. The neon sign outside flickers, struggling. Something inside me stops asking for permission. I'm done being the optics, I whisper. I pick up the brass paper knife, the one that opened the envelope, and set it between us like a line. Either you unwind this in the next 3 hours, I say, or I burn it down. He laughs, but his eyes flicker. With what? I step aside so he can see the street through the glass. Across from the window, Maya is standing on the sidewalk with her agent. A small crowd gathers. A news van turns the corner, camera eye winking. I look back at Elliot. With the truth, I say. And then from downstairs, the bell rings one more time, followed by Investigator Cardenas's voice. Mr. Finch, we have some questions. The brass paper knife sat heavy in my hand after Elliot's smirk. I didn't stab him with it. I wanted to for one dangerous second, but what good would that do? I needed sharper weapons than metal. I needed truth. Downstairs, Investigator Cardenas's voice floated up again. I let Elliot sweat while I slipped out of the office. His eyes followed me like a shadow pressed to glass. As I descended, I forced my legs to move slower than my heart. Each step was a stage, each breath a rehearsal. The investigators were already asking the staff questions, their pens scratching against paper like little claws. Maya stood with her arms folded, a quiet volcano. When she saw me, her gaze was both dagger and lifeline. You ready to tell them what you know? She asked. I nodded, but my throat felt like it was stapled shut. We moved into the back office, small and cramped with boxes of remaindered books stacked like mute witnesses. Cardenas leaned forward. Ms. Mercer, we need everything you have, emails, drafts, bank records. The faster you cooperate, the cleaner this will be for you. For me. The phrase rang in my head like a warning bell. Elliot had set the house on fire, and now I was trapped inside, coughing smoke. I'll give you everything, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. But I need something in return. Lang raised a brow. Which is protection. Because if Finch is this deep, I'm not convinced it stops with him. They exchanged a glance. Then Cardenas slid me a card. Call if he makes contact outside professional channels. And Sable. He softened his tone. Don't underestimate how scared guilty men can get. After they left, I sat on the floor between boxes. My phone buzzed nonstop, reporters, lawyers, even customers. The bookstore that had been my sanctuary was now a crime scene in hashtags. I scrolled through Elliot's shared folders again. Hidden drafts, multiple contracts, red lines that rewrote reality. Every click was a cut. Every file screamed you didn't know the man sitting next to you for 10 years. The betrayal wasn't just business. It was bone deep. Elliot wasn't just my partner. He was the one who told me I could do this, that my voice mattered in a city too loud for small bookstores. Now that same voice had sold me out. I pressed my palms to my eyes. You don't get to break me like this. That sentence whispered into my hands was the first step of my revenge. At 2:00 p.m., I forced myself back upstairs. Elliot was gone. His chair sat like a crime scene, outline a faint coffee ring marking his last excuse. But he left his laptop open. The folder staring back at me was labeled Pipeline. Inside a spreadsheet of authors. Names I knew, some we'd courted, others we'd lost to bigger houses. Columns for advances, rights, leverage notes. My stomach knotted. Elliot hadn't just done this to Maya. He had a list, a pipeline of fraud. I copied the file onto a flash drive and slipped it into my boot. The bookstore wasn't just at risk of collapsing, it was about to drag down everyone tied to it. That night, I met Maya at a coffee shop across from Prospect Park. The rain had turned the sidewalks into mirrors' cars, smearing light across the glass. She sat waiting, scarf unwound, a storm hiding behind her calm. You have something for me, she asked. I pulled the flash drive from my bag and set it on the table like it was contraband. He's running a system, not just you. Her jaw flexed. Then it's bigger than a lawsuit. It's bigger than both of us, I said. For a long time, she said nothing, just stared at the drive. Then she looked at me with a new kind of sharpness. If we burn him thoroughly. You sure you're ready for that? The question sank into me. Was I ready? Ready to torch not just Elliot, but the very bookstore I'd built brick by brick, page by page. If I pulled this thread, Mercer and Finch would be rubble by morning. But rubble can be the start of something honest. I nodded. I'm ready. Maya leaned back, her eyes softer now. Then we don't go quiet. We build a story louder than his lies. People love a story. She smiled, but it wasn't warmth, it was strategy. We sketched a plan on napkins. Interviews with staff, screenshots of drafts, recorded calls with other authors. We would show the fraud piece by piece until no one could ignore it. By the time I left the cafe, my veins were buzzing with fear and fire. The city was still wet, the streets humming. I looked at the bookstore's name glowing faintly from across the block. Mercer and Finch. The ampersand felt like a chain around my neck. For the first time in a decade, I whispered to myself, maybe it's just Mercer now. I didn't know Elliot had been watching from his car across the street. Didn't see the glow of his cigarette. Didn't hear the click of his lighter as he muttered into his phone. She's moving against me. We have a problem. I didn't sleep. I stacked receipts on my kitchen table like sandbags against a flood. By sunrise, my apartment looked like a paper museum. Every invoice, every Slack thread, every time-stamped bank ping. At 7 a.m., Liza knocked with croissants and a stare that meant we're doing this. She cleared a space and started sorting. We give people a show, she said. Not gossip, a timeline. A show. I hated the word and needed it. I texted Maya tonight. Open ledge at the shop. We build our own record. She replied with a single checkmark. I called Priya, the attorney from the fundraiser. She answered before the first ring finished. Say nothing you can't back with documents, she said, and assume he records every conversation. Already assumed, I said. And if he sues to gag us. He will, she said. That's what slap suits are for. But the truth is stubborn. I breathed shallow and sharp. Be there at 6. I'll bring tape and spine, she said. You bring paper. Next, I messaged a journalist I trusted, Cass Ree, an indie podcaster who loved bookstores more than trends. I sent her 3 screenshots and 1 plea. She sent back a calendar link. Mike at 7. Don't sanitize. By 9, I was at the shop. Our sign flickered awake like a bruised eye. Theo, our Saturday clerk and secret coding wizard, was already inside. He'd quit a tech boot camp to shelve hardcovers because books have better bugs. The drive you sent me, he said, lifting his hoodie hood. It's a data swamp, but metadata never lies. He spun the laptop around. Version histories, IP addresses, a map of edits that dragged Elliot's name across months. You can show a jury this, Theo said. You can show a live stream this. We're not a court, I said. We're a counterweight. At noon, Priya walked in carrying a legal pad and an aura that made people lower their voices. She read quickly, pen tapping like a metronome. Your partner's pattern is obvious, she said. Small deceptions that became a habit. The law calls that scheme. Juries call it enough. I told her about the distributor. I told her the penalty number that glowed like a dare. She nodded, unsurprised. Corporate pressure cooks good people into bad choices. Then the bad choices demand company. Do we name them tonight, I asked, or keep our sights narrowed to Elliot? Name the facts, not the villains, she said. Let the audience put faces on them. At 2, Cass arrived with a recorder and a canvas tote full of cables. She hugged me once, quick and human. On the record, she asked. On the record, I said. Her questions were soft, sharp. When did you know? What did you miss? Who are you if the store burns? I'm a person, I said, voice threaded with breath. Not a brand. But the brand has my name on it. At 3, Liza taped craft paper to the back wall and wrote timeline with a thick black marker. Theo printed screenshots on cheap paper that still smelled like toner. We pinned them up with binder clips. Every step, every edit, every lie. Customers drifted in quiet. Some bought paperbacks and left bills in the tip jar like flowers on a grave. A woman I barely knew pressed my hand. My daughter learned to love reading here, she said. We're with you. At 4:30, an envelope slid beneath the door. No courier this time. Just a shove and a footstep fleeing. Cease and desist. Finch's lawyer letterhead dense and smug. Defamation, it said. Interference with contractual relations. Priya skimmed it and smiled without humor. They always send this first. Do we stop? I asked. We document, she said. Then we proceed. At 5, the landlord called. His voice was apologetic and entirely transactional. Pressure from upstairs, he said. Distribution partners. They're concerned. What happens if they stay concerned? I asked. We revisit your lease, he said. I stared at the phone like it might confess. Understood. I hung up and laughed the kind of laugh that tastes like metal. Let them revisit, I told the empty air. I'm not renting my spine. By 6, the shop was full. Neighbors, authors, students with tote bags like armor. Maya came early, her agent 2 steps behind. They took seats by the timeline and said nothing, which said everything. Cass clipped a mic to my collar. Live in 3, she whispered. Let it breathe. The live stream opened to 100 viewers, then 500, then more. Hi, I said. I'm Sable Mercer. I believed good intentions could outrun bad systems. I was wrong. I told the story like untying a knot. Dates first, documents next, decisions last. I put Elliot's emails on the screen. I blacked out what didn't matter and left the rest to sting. I showed the pipeline spreadsheet. I let the columns speak. Theo patched in the version history and walked people through the edits. See the pattern, he asked. Edits made rights, slid money rerouted. The chat flickered with anger and ache. Someone typed, I bought every Maya book from you. I'll buy them again if it keeps you alive. Priya raised a hand from the side aisle. Remember, she said into her own mic, no one's guilty just because you hate them. They're guilty because of evidence. I nodded. We aren't here to feed a mob. We're here to build a record. Halfway through, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then the text lit up like a flare. He's framing it as your idea. Check the shared drafts from last winter. J, just the letter, no name, no context. Juniper journalist, a distributor moly. I searched the drive in real time. A folder I'd missed opened like a trapdoor. Inside a draft contract with my initials embedded in the file name. My initials in the comments. My tone, almost. Theo leaned in. That's a style clone, he whispered. He's mimicked your phrasing and backdated it with a metadata scrub. Can we prove it? I asked. If he was sloppy once Theo said fingers flying, he was sloppy twice. The chat swelled with confusion. I pulled the mic closer. Elliot tried to use my voice, I said. He almost succeeded. He did not. I felt the room tip toward me again. I held it with both hands. Maya stood and joined me at the front. I'm here because Sable fought for my work in rooms where I wasn't invited, she said. I'm staying because transparency is the only way we win. Applause cracked open something in my chest. For a second, I could breathe. Then the front door opened. Elliot walked in with 2 uniformed officers and a man in a navy suit carrying a folder like a weapon. The room went quiet, soundless as snow. The officers scanned the crowd. The suit stepped forward. Injunction, he said, thrusting papers at Priya. Ms. Mercer is enjoined from publishing proprietary documents and from making statements that materially damage Finch Harbor media. Priya read fast. Ex parte, she murmured. They got a judge to sign this without us present. Elliot looked at me like I was an inconvenience on his calendar. You could have come to the office, he said. We could have fixed optics. The crowd rustled with a collective growl. Liza crossed her arms like a gate. We're protecting our authors, I said. We're protecting the truth. The officer cleared his throat. Ma'am, we're here to enforce a civil order, not to arrest anyone. But if you continue the broadcast, you may be in contempt. The live stream chat exploded. Don't stop, we've got you. Lawyers incoming. I looked at Priya. Her eyes were steady. We have 2 choices, she said softly. End the stream and fight this in court. Or speak, violate the order, and dare the system to punish you. My heart clattered. My mouth tasted like old pennies and new courage. Beside me, Theo tugged my sleeve, whisper hushed. Sable. Check the cue, he said. I set a timed upload when we started in case they tried this. What upload? I breathed. Audio, he said. From the shared drive backup. Elliot on a call with the distributor rep bragging about the Shell LLC. It's got dates. It's got names. Where is it going? I asked. Everywhere, he said. Mirrors, torrents, secured nodes. Once it ticks, it sticks. I glanced at the officers. At Elliot's lawyer. At Elliot, who was smiling again. 2 minutes to publish, Theo whispered. 1 click to cancel. The officer shifted uneasy. The room held its breath. I looked into the camera. I told you the truth would be our weapon, I said. Elliot's smile thinned. Careful, he said. You're not bulletproof. Maybe not, but paper cuts add up. I met Theo's eyes. He hovered over the key like a pianist waiting for a downbeat. 3, he mouthed. 2. Sirens ghosted the block outside. The neon hummed. 1. Theo's whisper hung in the air like the last note of a song. 1 minute. Everyone in the room had their eyes on me. Customers, neighbors, Maya, her agent, even Liza, with powdered sugar still clinging to her apron. And Elliot. Always Elliot. The officers shifted uncomfortably clearly, wishing they were anywhere else. Priya's hand pressed lightly against my arm. If we cross this line, there's no walking it back. I knew that, but I also knew what silence would cost. The live stream chat scrolled too fast to read. Thousands now, tens of thousands. Don't fold Sable. He'll bury you if you stop. The world is watching. My heart hammered like a drum. I leaned into the mic. You wanted optics, Elliot. My voice trembled but carried. Here they are. Theo hit enter. The upload launched. A progress bar flashed for the crowd on the projector screen, crawling forward like a fuse. Elliot's smirk faltered. He pulled out his phone thumbs, frantic. Stop this, Sable, he hissed. You don't know what you've done. But I did. The file began to play. Elliot's voice filled the shop, tinny but unmistakable. Don't worry, they'll never check the metadata. Sable thinks contracts are just paper she doesn't see the back end. As long as I keep Maya pacified, we can roll the rights into harbor. The distributor's already on board. Gasps rippled through the room. Maya's face went pale, then hardened like stone. The officers exchanged a look. One muttered, that complicates things. The live stream chat detonated. Caught red-handed, proof. Elliot lunged for the laptop. Theo yanked it away, chair-scraping. Liza stepped forward, apron dust flying, and blocked him like a guard dog. You don't get to touch this store again, she said, her voice fierce enough to cut glass. The officers stepped in, finally breaking their neutral stance. Mr. Finch once said, you need to step back. For the first time all day, Elliot looked small, cornered, not in control. But then he smiled again. A tired, wolfish curve. You think the DA cares about your little live stream. You think one recording makes a case. The distributor will bury this with 100 lawyers. And you, Sable, he jabbed a finger at me. You'll go down with me, because your name is on the door. He wasn't wrong. The neon sign still buzzed Mercer and Finch outside a glowing shackle. I stepped closer. Then I'll take my name back, I said. And I'll burn the rest down before you use it again. Theo's laptop dinged. Upload complete. Automatic mirrors spreading the file everywhere, Twitter threads, YouTube channels, podcast feeds. It was too late to erase. The room erupted applause, shouts, the sharp click of Cass's recorder capturing every second. Elliot sagged into a chair, his face gray. For the first time, he didn't have a spin. But the relief was short-lived. Priya's phone buzzed and she scanned the screen with a frown. They're filing emergency motions, she whispered. Federal court. They're trying to freeze your assets, Sable. My chest went hollow. The store, my apartment, maybe even the accounts I used to pay staff, all under threat. And Elliot knew it. His eyes found mine steady and venomous. You might win the crowd, he said softly, but I win the system. The live stream chat slowed for a heartbeat waiting for me. I looked at Maya, at Liza, at Theo, at Cass, at the crowd that had become more than customers. Family forged by fire. I leaned into the mic again. Then let's change the system, I said. The crowd roared. Outside, more cameras gathered. Sirens wailed closer, and in the doorway a new figure appeared, Investigator Cardenas with 2 more agents. He held up a warrant. "For Finch Harbor Media," he said. His eyes flicked to Elliot. "And for you." Elliot's face drained of blood. The room held its breath. The reckoning had arrived. The warrant in Cardenas's hand might as well have been a torch. It set the room ablaze, not with fire, but with breathless silence. Elliot rose halfway, then sank back down like gravity had doubled just for him. His lawyer sputtered, waving papers. "This is harassment. My client." Cardenas cut him off with the kind of calm that ends arguments. "Your client can explain himself downtown, or he can make this harder." The crowd parted as if the floor itself knew who had built lies into its cracks. Elliot stood jaw clenched and finally let the smirk slip. "I built this store," he spat. "Without me, it's nothing but shelves and sentiment." I felt the words hit, because part of me knew there was truth in them. But the bigger truth was this: I'd rather stand among ashes than live in a palace built on fraud. The officers escorted him out. The live stream chat exploded, clapping emojis, fire icons, the kind of raw digital roar that felt like a crowd spilling into streets. Maya touched my arm. "You just cut out the rot," she whispered. "Now what's left can breathe." But breathing didn't come easy, because Priya was right, legal motions were moving faster than air. By midnight, I'd have frozen accounts. By morning, reporters camped outside my door. I ended the stream, voice trembling but clear. "This is not the end. This is the beginning of accountability." The chat erupted one last time, a tide of solidarity before I hit end broadcast. Afterward, the shop emptied slowly like a theater after curtain call. Liza stayed behind, sweeping crumbs into neat piles. Theo shut his laptop with a snap exhaustion under his hoodie. Cass hugged me, promising edits, uploads, mirrors. Only Maya lingered, scarf-loose eyes softer than I'd ever seen. "You fought for me again," she said, "even when it cost you everything." "It cost me half," I said, my throat thick. "The rest is still here." I gestured to the shelves, the dust, the stubborn neon flickering. "Then let's rebuild the half that matters," she said. But when I got home that night, the silence was heavier than applause. The inbox flooded with threats, offers, questions. A stack of legal notices waited in my email like vipers. And then one message at the bottom, from an address I didn't recognize. Subject line: "They'll come for you next." The body was a single line. "Follow the money. Harbor isn't the only harbor." My stomach dropped. Bigger than Elliot. Bigger than one bookstore. I looked at the city skyline lights pricking the night like unsent signals. If this was just one thread of a larger weave, then pulling it might unravel more than I imagined. I closed my laptop, whispering to the dark, "You wanted a fight, Elliot, fine. But you're not the only name on my list anymore." The next morning, a reporter's van idled outside my building. The story had gone national overnight. "Brooklyn bookstore blows whistle on rights fraud." Some headlines painted me as hero, others pawn accomplice liability. The truth sat somewhere in the ashes. I walked to the store anyway. The neon buzzed its stubborn hymn, Mercer and Finch. I flipped the switch. The Finch sputtered, then went dark. Just Mercer, for the first time. The crowd outside clapped like it was a christening. But deep down, I knew the war wasn't over. The war had only just lifted its curtain. The morning the Finch went dark, the bookstore felt both lighter and lonelier. No more Ampersand tether, just Mercer. My name, my burden, my weapon. But victory is never clean. By noon, Priya arrived with her legal pad face tight. "They froze your accounts," she said. "Checking savings, even the line of credit. You'll need pro bono and fast." I laughed brittle. "So much for selling books to pay the bills." "This isn't about books anymore," she said. "It's about leverage." Outside, reporters clogged the sidewalk. Some shouted questions. "Did you know about Finch Harbor Media? Are you liable for your partner's fraud? Are you the whistleblower Brooklyn didn't know it needed?" I didn't answer, because each question was a trap. Instead, I opened the door, Wide flipped the sign to open and let customers walk past the cameras. The smell of ink and paper drowned out the noise. For a moment, the store felt like itself again. At 3 o'clock, Cass returned, recorder in hand. She'd edited our live stream into a polished episode overnight. 300,000 downloads already, she said, eyes shining. But Sable, someone's feeding me things. Documents that didn't come from you. She slid a USB across the counter. Anonymous drop. I plugged it into Theo's laptop. A folder opened labeled Simply Dockside. Inside were PDFs, corporate records, wire transfers, contracts, with signatures I didn't recognize. Not Elliot's, not mine. But the names at the bottom made my blood run. Cold Harbor Distribution, LLC. Mariner Rights Holdings. Atlantic Inc. Group. Publishing conglomerates, Priya murmured. Not small fry, Sable. This isn't just Elliot's shell game. This is scaffolding. That night, I read every page. Wire transfers from offshore accounts. Emails between Elliot and middle managers I'd only ever seen across trade show floors. He was a pawn. A willing pawn, yes, but still a pawn in something vaster. And the anonymous source, they weren't done. Another message hit my inbox before midnight. Follow the Atlantic Trail. Ask why rights get funneled offshore. I closed the laptop, stomach knotted. The war had escalated, and I'd become the face of it. The next morning, the doorbell to my apartment rang. Through the peephole, Cardenas. He looked tired, but his voice was steady. You've stirred something, he said. We have subpoenas now. But Sable, this is bigger than a DA's office case. These companies, they fund campaigns. They buy judges. So what do? I asked. He met my eyes. We keep pulling, carefully. And you keep telling your story because the court of public opinion doesn't run on bribes. That afternoon, I sat with Maya in the quiet corner of the shop. She sipped tea, calm as stone. You don't have to carry this alone, she said. Your fight started with saving my book, but now it's more. It's all of us. Her words landed heavy. I wasn't just fighting Elliot anymore. I was fighting a machine that saw stories as assets, not voices. I looked around the store, our shelves, our scrawled timeline still taped to the wall, ashes and sparks, and maybe enough to light a fire bigger than Brooklyn. That night, as I closed up my phone, buzzed again. Another anonymous message. This one wasn't text. It was a photo. Grainy, black and white. Elliot in an interrogation room, head down, a shadow behind him, whispering. The caption read, "He's not your biggest enemy, he's your bait." My throat tightened. If Elliot was bait, then the hook was already set. And I was the fish they wanted to reel in. The photo haunted me all night. Elliot hunched in that interrogation room, a shadow whispering behind him. The caption, "He's bait." I lay awake replaying it. If Elliot was bait, then someone bigger was fishing, and they wanted me on the hook. By morning, I felt hollow but determined. If they thought I was easy prey, they hadn't read my story close enough. At the shop, Theo was already at the counter, hoodie pulled tight. He tapped his screen. The audio's gone viral, mirrors everywhere. But Sable, there's a pushback campaign, too. Bots calling you a fraud, saying you staged everything. I leaned over, watching comments roll by in endless scroll. Accusations, smears, photoshopped evidence. They're testing the waters, Priya said, coming in behind me. If they can muddy you, they can muddy the case. And if I fight back, I asked. Then you stop being bait, she said. You become a hunter. That afternoon, Cass dropped by with her recorder, eyes alight. Anonymous source reached out again, she said. This time it wasn't a file, it was a meeting request. Dockside Cafe. Midnight. Theo frowned. That's cliché as hell. Which means it's either a trap or exactly what it says, I muttered. Maya crossed her arms. You can't go alone. I have to, I said. If they want me, they'll clam up if it looks like an ambush. Priya shook her head, lips tight. At least let us shadow you from outside. I didn't argue, because truth be told, I was scared enough to want shadows. Dockside Cafe was half empty at midnight, neon buzzing jukebox, humming old jazz. I slid into a booth, ordered black coffee, and waited. 5 minutes, 10. Then a figure sat across from me, face hidden under a ball-cap voice low. "You don't know me," they said, "but I've seen the ledgers. Atlantic Inc. isn't just buying rights, they're laundering money through ghost contracts. Your partner was sloppy, that's why he got burned. But the rest, they're clean. Too clean." "Why me?" I asked. "Why send this to me?" "Because you already cracked the door," the stranger said. "Now it has to stay open. And because you're not in their pocket." I studied the stranger's hands, ink-stained like they'd been handling old paper. "You're inside," I whispered. They didn't answer, which was answer enough. "Follow the Atlantic Trail," they said again. "But watch your step. They don't just bury contracts, they bury people." And then they were gone, leaving behind a receipt folded neatly in half. On the back, scribbled in pencil, March 12th, Pier 41, Storage Unit B. I walked out to find Priya and Theo waiting across the street. "What did they give you?" Priya asked. I showed her the receipt. Her jaw tightened. Storage units. Classic. Theo typed fast on his phone. "Pier 41's mostly shipping containers. If there's paper there, it's gold. If there's nothing, it's a setup." Maya's text buzzed my phone. "Don't trust too fast. Remember, bait attracts bait fish too." I tucked the receipt into my coat. Whatever was in that unit, it could either break the system wide open or break me. Back at home, I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at the folded receipt, turning it over and over. Every instinct screamed trap. But every part of me that had carried this bookstore, fought for these authors, whispered, "You can't stop now." At 3 a.m., another anonymous email landed. A single attachment, a scan of a warehouse log. Highlighted entry, Unit B, Pier 41, Contents Ledgers, Atlantic Holdings Box, Count 14. The final line chilled me. Accessed by Elliot Finch, February 22nd. If Elliot had been there, then he wasn't just bait. He was the rope tying me to the hook. I closed the laptop, heart pounding. The trap was set. The question was, who would spring it first? The receipt burned in my pocket all day. March 12th. Pier 41, Storage Unit B. Like a dare, written in pencil. I tried to lose myself in shelving books, but every title seemed to whisper, "Go look." By nightfall, I couldn't resist. Priya insisted on coming. Theo packed his laptop and a crowbar just in case. Maya, she surprised me by showing up at the shop door with 2 thermoses of coffee. "You think I'd let you face this without backup," she said. For the first time in days, I felt less alone. Pier 41 loomed like a skeleton in fog. Shipping containers stacked like crooked teeth. The smell of salt rust and secrets. We found Unit B tucked at the far end, padlocked, unmarked, but fresh tire tracks cut across the gravel in front of it. "Someone's been here," Theo whispered. I touched the lock cold under my palm. "Do we open it?" Priya sighed. "If there's evidence, we need to preserve chain of custody. But if we don't look, we risk walking away from the truth." The choice gnawed at me. Law or truth, order or justice. Maya broke the silence. "Sometimes you don't wait for permission. Sometimes you just act." Theo slipped the crowbar into the padlock loop. One hard twist. The lock popped. Inside was darkness. We clicked on our phones. 14 boxes stacked in neat rows, each labeled with Sharpie Atlantic Holdings Ledger. I knelt and opened the top one. Inside binders. Pages upon pages of contracts, bank transfers, signatures, stamps. Priya leaned close, scanning. "This is systemic. Rights routed offshore. Money laundered through ghost imprints. Finch Harbor was just one spoke in a wheel." My stomach turned. All those years fighting to keep a small bookstore alive, while giants used words like currency trading them in shadows. "This is bigger than Brooklyn," I whispered. "This is international." Theo's laptop chimed. He'd hooked into the dockside Wi-Fi, eyes darting across code. "Guys, we've been tripped." Motion sensor went off. "Someone knows we're here." Maya cursed under her breath. Headlights cut across the lot, sweeping like searchlights. A black SUV rolled toward us, tires crunching gravel. Grab what you can, Priya ordered. We stuffed ledgers into bags, hands trembling. Theo snapped photos, each click echoing in the metal cavern. The SUV doors slammed open. Men in dark jackets spilled out, moving fast. Go, I shouted. We ran. Gravel skidding under boots, papers flying from my arms like wounded birds. Theo clutched his laptop to his chest. Maya held tight to one heavy binder face set like steel. Behind us, footsteps thundered. A voice barked, "Stop, you don't know what you're taking." We didn't stop. We burst through the chain-link gate, lungs, burning night air, slicing sharp. Priya's car screeched up she'd called in backup. We piled in as hands slammed against the windows. Tires squealed. We shot out onto the highway, hearts hammering, ledgers safe for now. Back at the shop, we dumped the binders onto the reading table. Pages fanned out, thick with secrets. Theo's hands shook as he scanned barcodes printed in margins. "These aren't just contracts," he muttered. "They're cross-referenced. Atlantic Holdings owns Mariner, which owns Harbor, which owns half the indie distribution channels in New York. They control the pipeline. And they've been skimming off every author for years." Maya flipped a page, eyes wide. "They own the storytellers, and the storytellers never knew." Priya exhaled, slow and grim. "If this gets out, it's not just one fraud case. It's antitrust, RICO, federal." I stared at the mountain of paper, overwhelmed, furious, terrified. For a decade, I thought my enemy was rent hikes, Amazon discounts, vanishing readers. But my real enemy was this machine, silent, invisible, devouring voices like kindling. I whispered more to myself than anyone. They wanted me on the hook. They wanted me to drown before I saw this, but now I see it. The shop hummed quiet, heavy with revelation. Then Theo spoke, voice shaking. Sable. "We've got another problem." He turned his laptop around. On the screen, a live feed from a dockside camera. It showed the SUV men, and one of them held a binder, the same kind Maya had carried. The feed timestamp read March 12th, 11:56 p.m., but it wasn't playback. It was live. They were already at another unit. The live feed froze me in place. Another storage unit, another binder, and the men in black jackets moving like they already owned the night. Theo's voice cracked. "That's not our unit, that's next door. They're clearing evidence right now." Priya leaned over the screen, jaw tightening. "They knew we'd hit B, so they're scrubbing C." The thought hit me like a brick. We weren't just exposing the scheme, we were racing against its erasure. "We have to go back," I blurted. Theo's eyes widened. "Back Sable, we barely made it out alive." "If they wipe everything, our binders look like scraps," I said. "We need the full picture." Maya's hand landed on mine, steady, fierce. "She's right. If we let them torch it, they'll say Mercer fabricated everything." Priya muttered a curse, then snapped her pen shut. "Fine. But this time, we don't go in blind. We call Cardenas. He wanted bigger. We'll give him bigger." 20 minutes later, we were parked in an unmarked sedan 2 blocks from Pier 41. Cardenas sat in the driver's seat, eyes scanning the fog. "You realize," he said, "if they catch you with me, you'll look like informants, and they'll come harder." "Then let them," I said. My voice surprised me. I didn't sound scared anymore. I sounded ready. Theo tapped at his laptop, piggybacking off dock cameras. There, Unit C, 4 men inside, 1 SUV waiting. Cardenas nodded. "Stay here. If it blows up, you walk away." But walking away was no longer in me. We crept through shadows, gravel, crunching like gunfire underfoot. Unit C's door was half-open metal, groaning as boxes scraped inside. I could see the men tossing binders into black bags like garbage. Every binder they carried felt like a voice disappearing. Every page a stolen story, erased before anyone knew it lived. Maya hissed, "We can't just watch." Cardenas moved, first badge, flashing voice sharp as steel. "Federal agents, drop the boxes, now." For a second, the world stopped. Then chaos. The men scattered shouts colliding with the screech of metal doors. One lunged at Cardenas. Another bolted with a bag slung over his shoulder. I didn't think. I ran after him. The gravel tore at my shoes, breath ragged in my throat. "Stop," I screamed, though I knew he wouldn't. He glanced back, eyes shadowed under his hood, and for a heartbeat I swore I recognized the jawline. Elliot. The recognition hit me like ice. Had he been released, cut a deal, or was my ex-partner now one of their errand boys? "Elliot," I shouted, voice breaking. The man faltered, but only for a second. Then he vanished into the fog SUV engine roaring to life. I stumbled, chest heaving. Maya caught up, eyes blazing. "Did you see who that was?" I think it was him. Even saying it felt like betrayal all over again. Back at the shop, we laid out what little we'd managed to save from Unit C. Half a binder pages torn, numbers, signatures, half-legible trails. Priya pressed her fingers to her temples. This proves nothing without context. Worse, it looks like cherry-picking, exactly what their lawyers will say. Theo shoved his laptop toward us. Unless we expose the chase itself, live stream the hunt, show people how they're burying evidence. Maya's jaw tightened. They wanted to bait you, Sable, but maybe we flip it, make them the bait. I looked at the binders, the torn pages, the fog still clinging to my clothes. They were dismantling this empire piece by piece, just faster than we could hold it together. And maybe Elliot was out there still part of it, or maybe just another pawn scrambling to survive. Either way, the truth was bleeding, and if we didn't stitch it up, it would die. I clenched my fists. Then we go louder, no more shadows. If they want a hunt, we'll give them one with the whole world watching. Theo hit record on his phone. The red light blinked steady and merciless. Somewhere in the fog, another SUV door slammed shut, and a voice drifted over the night air. "You don't know the size of the net you're in, Mercer." The voice in the fog clung to me like a second skin. "You don't know the size of the net you're in." It echoed all night, even after we barricaded ourselves in the shop binders stacked like sandbags against the storm. By dawn, exhaustion pressed against my skull, but adrenaline kept me upright. Theo uploaded our livestream of the chase. Within hours, views hit millions. The world wasn't just watching, they were choosing sides. Your Mercer of the machine trended across Twitter. But the higher the noise, the louder the silence from those who mattered most: judges, publishers, politicians. At noon, Priya stormed in, waving her phone. "They've filed injunctions. They want all your footage scrubbed. They're arguing it's illegally obtained." "Of course they are," I muttered. Maya slammed her tea down. "Then let's go louder. Bury their emotions in noise they can't suppress." Theo looked up, eyes rimmed red. "Sable. If we push this, they'll come after you personally, not just the store, your name, your future." I laughed hollow. "They already did. What else can they take?" Priya's voice was soft but sharp. "They can take your freedom." That night, the anonymous source returned. Not in person, in pixels. An email dropped into my inbox, a short video file. I clicked play. Elliot's voice, but not the cocky, smirking Elliot I knew. This voice was desperate, cracked. "They're using me, Sable. I didn't mean for it to go this far. They'll burn me alive if I don't deliver." Pier 41 was just the start. Atlantic has warehouses in Jersey, Baltimore, overseas. Please. The video cut off mid-sentence. Theo's face drained. They cut him off, mid-transmission. The weight of it sank into me. If Elliot was reaching out, then maybe he wasn't just bait. Maybe he was drowning in the same net. But Priya shook her head. "Don't trust it. He played you before. He'll play you again." I stared at the frozen frame of his face on the screen. A man I once trusted with every page of my life, now begging like a broken spine. My chest twisted, because beneath the rage there was still grief. We gathered around the binders again. Theo traced connections across pages, lines of ink like veins in a corpse. "Look at this. Atlantic moves rights offshore. Mariner launders through subsidiaries. Harbor funnels them back stateside." But here he pointed to a page. This code. It isn't a contract number. It's a shipping manifest. Maya leaned closer. So, they're not just laundering money. They're laundering content. Whole manuscripts disappearing into shell companies before authors even know they've sold. Priya exhaled sharply. That's intellectual property theft on a global scale. And now the world knows, I said. My voice felt steadier than my hands. But before we could plan, glass shattered at the front of the shop. A brick skidded across the floor, stopping against a shelf of poetry. Attached to it, a note scrawled in thick marker. "Stop or you all stop." Liza burst in seconds later, face pale. They're outside, vans, men just waiting. Theo killed the lights. We crouched among the shelves, our breath loud in the silence. Maya whispered, "They won't stop Sable. They'll choke this out until no one remembers." And in the dark, I realized she was right. We couldn't just defend anymore. We had to attack. I stood heart-pounding, holding the note. They want us to stop. That means we're close. Too close for their comfort. I dropped the brick on the counter like a gavel. Then tomorrow, we stop playing defense. We take this to the streets, to the press, to every corner they can't control. Theo's eyes flicked to me, both terrified and lit with fire. "You mean full release?" "Yes, everything. Every binder, every file, every photo. If they want to bury us, they'll have to bury the whole damn truth." Outside headlights swept across the windows, lingering too long. The vans were still there. The net was tightening. But maybe nets weren't only for catching. Maybe they could be torn apart.